Much more recently, in fact, just in the last few years, Arvid Gutterstam, working first at Princeton University, now at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, has shown that by some very ingenious experiments that people attribute a gentle force to the gaze as it goes out of the eyes. And they've even shown, using fMRI, that regions of the brain involved in tracking movement are activated. And as he puts it, the results, this is a quote, strongly suggest that when people view a face looking at an object, the brain treats that gaze as if a movement were present, passing from the face to the object. And they found that this occurred even in people who didn't believe in visual extramission. It's deep, hardwired in the way we see. And they tried to explain this by saying there must be an evolutionary reason for it, that it's important to track people's gaze in social situations, and this leads to the illusion that something's going out of the eyes when you look at things. It would make much better sense in evolutionary terms if it's not an illusion, but if it's real. And so is it real? Well, you're not meant to think it's real because that goes against the dogma that the mind is nothing but the activity of the brain and the perceptions are inside the head. But is it testable? Well, I think it is. If when I look at you as a projection from my mind that touches you, my mind in a sense reaches out to touch you, if I look at you from behind and you don't know I'm there, could you feel that I'm looking at you? Well, as soon as you ask that question, you realize that the sense of being stared at is very common. It's now called scopaesthesia, the scientific name for it. Scop as in microscope, seeing, aesthesia, feeling, as in synesthesia, anesthesia. Scopaesthesia is extremely common. Most people have experienced it. I'm sure most people in this room have experienced it. You turn around, you find someone's looking at you, or you stare at someone and they turn around and look back. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's very common. Most people have experienced it, including most children. It's usually directional. You turn and look straight at the person. You don't just feel uneasy and search around. I have a recent paper just in the last few weeks on directional scopaesthesia showing that on the basis of 960 case studies, the directionality is just a basic feature of this and the way people experience it. I've investigated the natural history. We've interviewed, we've dealt with through questionnaires. We found it typically happens most powerfully with strangers, often with male strangers in situations that could be vaguely threatening. We've done interviews with more than 50 surveillance officers, celebrity photographers, and private detectives, practically all of whom just take this for granted. If you've ever trained to be a private detective, and I'm guessing that most of you haven't, you will have learned that when you're following someone, shadowing somebody, you don't stare at their back, because if you do, they'll turn around, catch your eyes, and your cover's blown. You have to look at them a little bit, otherwise you lose them, but you look at their feet. So among practical people, these things are completely taken for granted. In the martial arts, it's taken for granted, and they have methods of training people to become more sensitive. Because if you can feel when someone's approaching from behind who might attack you, you'll survive better than if you didn't feel it. They train this ability. People get better at it. And I think it should be trainable more widely. My Spanish neuroscientist colleague, Dr. Alex Gomez-Marin, and I are currently developing an app that works on mobile phones. It should be released within a few weeks. We'll announce it on my website. The app, both people have a mobile phone. One tells one person when to stare or not to stare, and the other person who's got their back to them and who's blindfolded has to guess if they're being looked at or not. And they say yes or no. They're right or wrong. Well, many experiments have already been done on the sense of being stared at. They've been done in at least 37 different schools and colleges. They've been replicated in many parts of the world. The statistical significance is astronomical. At the Nemo Science Museum in Amsterdam, an experiment on the sense of being stared at was running for more than 20 years. More than 20,000 people took part. And it was called Have You Got Eyes in the Back of Your Head? And people had to guess whether they were being looked at or not in a randomized sequence of trials. The results were astronomically significant statistically. I mean, I didn't run this experiment myself. It was run by the Dutch Museum. The results were analyzed by Dutch statisticians, and it showed a massively significant effect. The most sensitive subjects, incidentally, were children under the age of 9. So here we have something which is extremely well known. It's well known all over the world. The scientific evidence suggests it really happens. The scientific teaching of how mirrors work assumes that there's an extramission of influences. It seems to be deep seated in biology. It happens with animals. Animals can tell when they're being looked at, and when they're and people can tell when animals are looking at them. So here we have a very, very well-known phenomenon, very deep-seated biologically. Many different species of animals have shown this ability. I think it's evolved in the context of predator-prey relationships. A prey animal that could tell when a predator was looking at it, a hidden predator was looking at it, would survive better than one that didn't. And I think it has enormous implications for our understanding of the mind. Because if our minds are not just about what happens in brains, and if our conscious experience is extended through electromagnetic fields, which is what light is, it suggests that minds have an interface with electromagnetism. We know they do in the brain. A lot of brain activity that correlates with consciousness is electromagnetic activity. There seems to be an interface between electromagnetism and consciousness, and why it should be confined to the inside of the head is a purely arbitrary assumption. It comes from René Descartes originally, I suppose, or from the ancient Greek materialists. But Descartes, as Aniel pointed out, made a division between extended things, res extensa, matter, is extended in space, whereas mind, res cogitans, was not extended in space. It was defined by being unextended. So the idea was the mind was unextended, but interacted with the brain somewhere inside the head. So I'm suggesting that actually, when we let go of that assumption, which has been so limiting for so long, we can broaden our view of the mind and go further than we've gone so far in a way that will help to solve the real problems leading towards the hard problem. Finally, I just want to say that I think the extended mind doesn't just extend out into the world, it extends throughout the body. And when someone has, say, a phantom limb after an amputation, I think that that phantom limb is part of the extended mind, and people feel the limb to be really there. And I think what they're doing is projecting that image of the limb and feeling it from within as to where the limb actually is. The official view is it's all inside the brain. But I don't think it is. And so I think once we liberate the mind from the brain more generally and consciousness from the brain more particularly, we have a much wider context for discussing this knotty problem, the hard problem of the relation between mind and brain. There are many other ways minds are extended, including the ways that Tanya told us about through these experiences of other forms of consciousness. But those, I think, are subjects I hope we'll take up further in our discussion. But for now, I just want to end by saying that I think when we take into account the extended mind, instead of just arbitrarily confining it to the inside of the head, we're much more likely to make progress in understanding how minds are related to our bodies and to the physical fields through which we see and through which we have our experiences.